Sasha, hopefully you can hear me and see me clearly.
Yes, I can see you now and hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for the introduction, and great to hear lots of conversations there, really around legal content, legal research and litigation analytics. Part of my introduction and part of my speech today will be about digital transformation as it particularly relates to the Middle East and African regions. It's part of my role to work in some of the most challenging territories where we don't necessarily always have the most access to the clearest information. And as part of that, a lot of the efforts that we've seen during the pandemic and during this unprecedented year is to digitally transform not just the way that organizations are working with applications like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, but actually how the legal function has been impacted immediately. So just to start by setting some context, my agenda for today is to really give you some insight into what's happening as it relates to corporate legal departments in the MENA region, how they are undertaking digital transformation, how some of that has been forced. And we'll split that into two sections, just by briefly touching on the legal data and research platforms and then looking at some legal technology solutions. As always, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat as we go through the agenda. So, as the panel previously mentioned in the previous session, most of what's been categorized as legal technology or legal transformation has really sat around the area of research. This area of research has been digitized, has been uploaded to platforms like PLC, like LexisNexis, to centralize all of the legislation, practice notes, guidance notes, even some pre-automated activities and templates that lawyers can use wherever they are in the world. But for much of time over the last 10 to 15 years, that's all really legal technology has been. Some of the larger organizations in the US and the UK have led the way through establishing legal case management, legal practice management platforms, but we've always seen that through a reactive scope. We've seen that as it relates to the 2008 recession and economic crisis, how banks and financial institutions had to establish systems for litigation management as a result of that. And much of that was reactive, not taking into account the proactive view as to how legal transformation can be managed. So that centralization of that research has been done. That online data is searchable, retrievable for the most part, and accessible, and often at a price point and a security point that people are comfortable with across the industry. If we think about that legal data research as being the foundation, the blocks or the pillars of what legal technology then becomes on top of that, we think about things like practice notes, contracts and agreements, checklists, and giving you practical guidance in the way that you do things as a lawyer, whether you're working in a law firm, corporate legal department, or government legal department. So what the pandemic and what this year has done in particular is not just transform the way that we're able to communicate with each other. You know, virtual events were pretty much unheard of until the last couple of years, but it's also pushed legal departments to be able to provide collaboration. Many of the clients that I work with, you can imagine, across the Middle East, Africa and Russia, were not set up to work remotely. We still had clients and offices that worked on desktop PCs that didn't even have laptops, where no virtual private networks, VPNs were even established, or allowing the users and the lawyers that were stuck at home to even connect to the machines or laptops or PCs that were sat in the office. So this presented a huge challenge in itself. What the market now needs, and particularly in the corporate legal space now needs, is accessible and affordable legal technology. The days of heavy, cumbersome, on-premise deployments, which require a lot of architecture, a lot of servers, a lot of network space and security, have passed. Cloud-based solutions, software as a service solutions are paramount. And for those jurisdictions that are able to use them and have adopted them, whether that be led by government legislation changes or a general change in sentiment towards hosting as a region or territory, that has allowed us to make legal technology more affordable and more accessible for legal departments. So if you think about most of the organizations working across the Middle East and Africa, they are covering a tremendous amount of territory, just geographically. Offices in different countries, hundreds of miles apart, thousands of miles apart in some cases. And what that presents is the need for legal technology. I'll start by first defining and giving a bit of a definition around what legal tech is. We'll also have a little bit of focus here on what we don't think it is or what it isn't. So if we look at legal tech, you'll see a lot of discrepancy, even some disagreement as to what is defined as a legal technology solution versus a general software system or general technology platform. So historically, what we've been looking at is legal tech companies are often startups, and they're founded with that purpose of disrupting our traditionally conservative legal market. If you were to have just had these discussions with lawyers 10, 15, 20 years ago about technology, even assisting, let alone potentially replacing lawyers in some of the work they do, it would have been met with, a lot of, let's say, negative feedback, a lot of unlikeliness that it's going to actually occur. But what we're seeing now is that this advent of not only investment into the legal tech industry from companies like Thomson Reuters, but also a tremendous amount of investment from Series A, Series B, Series C funding and equity partners into a space that is growing exponentially. So the typical kind of clients that are going to be looking for legal technology solutions are going to be categorizing it into a few key areas. We can think about these again being as our building blocks. We've got that know-how and that legal research piece. And I'm quite a big advocate for saying that I don't feel that, for me personally, that fits into the legal technology space. It is, of course, a part of it, but I think that there's far more innovative things that we can do outside of just centralizing research. We can look at things like spend and matter management for corporate and law firm legal departments. We can look at providing our clients with ways of collaborating both on documents and contracts through collaboration systems, virtual data rooms, and all of the workflow automation and legal self-service that goes alongside that. If I now have a large corporate organization that is now restricted to working from home, that is restricted to limited office access, I need to provide that organization, that business, with the ability to provide self-service tools, automated systems, and centralized systems. So when we're speaking with our clients and they're looking at that, they're breaking it down into a few key areas. How does legal technology work? Well, the main requirement here is a level of flexibility around the solutions. I mentioned that historically you would have had heavy, expensive on-premise deployments of legal technology solutions. That time is passing. There's also a focus now away from building your own systems. Legal departments that I speak with in developed legal departments, but also in developing groups, are looking for systems that provide the functionality, the scalability, and the maturity of a product that can be configured out of the box. They don't want to spend 6, 9, 12 months implementing a solution that by the time it's implemented will already be somewhat outdated. But there's a recurring theme in terms of what and how these legal technology solutions are working. And controlling cost is something that continues to come up as our #1 response on all of the surveys that we run, both at Thomson Reuters and also in partnership with Hackaton. And I'll bring up some of those metrics in a moment. So we're looking at controlling costs, we're looking at maximizing efficiency and effectiveness, mitigating risk, and ultimately demonstrating value to the business. But as I mentioned, there is just becoming this shift between it being a reactive process of legal technology being put in place because there's been a problem, to putting something proactively in place for future transactions, future legal work, future acquisitions of companies, and so on. So Thomson Reuters, in partnership with Hackaton, ran a survey of over 1,000 corporate legal departments. And as part of that Hackaton survey last year, still the #1 metric that legal departments wanted to be able to manage and prioritize was external law firm spending, so our outside counsel spending. So we've heard a couple of times on the panels here today about artificial intelligence, analytics. If I had $1 for every time that a client in the Middle East asked me to implement an AI solution for them, I'd be an incredibly rich man. But the reality is that our market and those solutions are not adapted enough for the Middle East and Africa as yet. They're not adapted to handle bidirectional languages, which Arabic is. They're not adapted to handle data hosting or data residency in all cases. And as such, if you're focusing on some of the more speculative and some of the more future and forward-thinking solutions without establishing the fundamentals, then I really think that your priorities are somewhat out of place. There is still a huge amount of legal departments working in this region, particularly in Middle East and Africa, that are running on spreadsheets, shared folders, desktops, and dare I say it, the dreaded USB stick. So without those fundamentals in place of having a centralized way of managing things like spend, being able to review your ratios of staffing on matters, basic budget forecasting and financial planning, there's going to be a tremendous amount of risk to the entire organization that you're working with, not just the legal department. So we need to have that realistic view as to where we are on this journey. And I'll touch on this in a moment when we look at the legal department maturity matrix that we've put together here at Thomson Reuters as well. A couple of other key metrics. 70% of our respondents wanted to be able to leverage expert know-how and research. So even though we're in 2020 and know-how and research has been around for at least 20 to 25 years, whether that be in printed format, whether that be on digital format, there is still a huge amount of our participants to this survey that require that basic access to know-how and research, that haven't yet established those templates or built those templates for repeatable work. We don't want our corporate legal department to be spending hours and hours drafting the same non-disclosure agreements over and over. Neither do we want our law firm lawyer to be entering his time or her time into a spreadsheet, which then gets billed out into an invoice to our client. We want to try and automate as much of that as possible. In addition to all of that, data security has been paramount, whether that's GDPR, whether that's the data security and legislation that affects these territories. Of course, in the Middle East and Africa, access to information is the toughest part. Access to transparent information about the data security legislation that applies or should apply to those geographies can often be hard to come by. And lastly, 60% said that monitoring and mitigating their risk was key, facilitating those collaborative business partner relationships and demonstrating that decisions had been made by using data. Now, many of this, for many of our attendees, will seem like very simplistic, very basic, level 1 legal technology or legal implementation. But for so many of our clients in these geographies, there still is real challenges in collecting and collaborating on that data, providing a seamless link between the legal department and the business users, the relationship managers in that corporate space, and equally between your law firm and your clients. So moving away from wet ink signatures, signed stamps, wax seals on letters that is quite commonplace here, to moving towards things like digital signature, e-bundling, document collaboration and data rooms, which are becoming more commonplace, but are really still needing to be driven through the course of 2020 as we come out of the end of the pandemic. So something to consider, and for every client that I would speak with, this has a corporate legal department focus, but we also have a law firm department matrix, is to think about where you are in terms of your digital transformation journey. As I mentioned, I would be incredibly rich if I'd implemented all of those wonderful AI and contract analysis solutions for Arabic contracts. But the fact is, I know that those solutions won't work, and they equally don't have the data at this stage in time or at this point in time to provide meaningful insights. So have a think about where your legal department is, and you can score it by using the maturity matrix. Now, of course, you can adapt this as necessary, but we can see 5 key dependent columns. We have our chaotic approach and we have our predictive approach. So you'll see that for the most part, when I'm speaking with corporate legal departments across Middle East and Africa, we're looking at reactive. We're looking at some level of data collection, which is consistent and trusted, a level of spend visibility, but many manual processes around workflow and collaboration. So as you start to score or effectively determine where your legal department or where your law firm department sits, you can see how we move through from being a chaotic or reactive legal department through to a proactive or optimized. And even some of the leading departments in the UK and the US are still working in this channel somewhere between proactive and optimized. There is still room for improvement across the board. But proactive would give me the insight at least to see how I'm comparing and how I'm evaluating the law firms that I engage on my panel. Panel reviews have become commonplace across the UK and European regions, but often are done on relationship or personal preferences across these regions that we're focusing on today. But we have seen a push from financial institutions, telecommunications, and shipping and logistics, particularly in the Middle East, where these legal departments have benefited incredibly from the effects of the pandemic. Shipping providers like Aramex and logistics providers like Aramex have grown 3-4 times their previous legal department size. Telecommunications companies, obviously with the need for more people working from home, additional infrastructure, additional internet connections, have profited from this. And as such, they then looked at that as a way to invest in the legal department and to provide the business the tools to be able to make more sales, issue more contracts more accurately and effectively, but equally to be able to mitigate that risk in the event that legal risk does occur. If we look at predictive, which is where we hope to see all of the legal departments of the future, we're going to have wholly and truthfully driven, data-driven decisions. We're going to see preferred partnership, effective management of panels, spend predictability, so not just looking at budgetary forecasting on a quarterly or monthly basis, but having insight into what metrics, what analytics will affect our spend, market conditions, data modeling that will allow us to effectively forward strategic plan. And alongside that, we'll see the advent and the further rollout of roles like legal technologists, legal operations directors, alongside our digital transformation managers, people that are specifically targeted with transforming the way that the legal department works. The historic and typically failed implementations of non-legal tech products into the legal departments will have passed. Those projects will have failed, the projects will come back around, will go through an evaluation, and dedicated and established legal technology solutions will be put in place. So we'll see that the legal departments of the future will really become strategic business partners with operations predictability. So just to give you a flavor of some optimized and predictive legal technology, we can categorize much of this into what we call ELM, which is Enterprise Legal Management. Now, you don't have to be a huge organization to be operating in this space, but there are characteristics of ELM that apply across different legal technology solutions. And if we break them down into 6 kind of key areas, we're looking at the following. We're looking at a system that has the concept of a hub or a collaborative space, an area where multiple stakeholders can be more efficient, can automate and can demonstrate the value of that legal department with centralization and visualization of data. As much as we would all love to go paperless, there's still a tremendous amount of paperwork that goes through the courts, the legal departments and law firms in these regions. And as such, even if copies of that are digitally stored or physically stored, they need to be locatable. We need to be able to know where that information is stored. It needs to be searchable, readable. And even if it is still being physically stored, we need to know the location of that at a very quick point in time, as well as the contracts that go alongside that. So I do think that we'll see AI tools being more widely used in the region for things like contract extraction and analysis. There will need to be the consideration of non-Germanic languages to be included in that. And there are a couple of key stakeholders, key partners in our region that are doing that. But paramount to all of this will be the security and the scalability of these solutions. There will always be a tremendous amount of scrutiny about using a SaaS or cloud-hosted solution, and the due diligence, the security review, the information security assessments that go alongside that. So what would an enterprise legal management system look like? Whether you are operating in a law firm, corporate legal department, or government legal department, there'll be some common characteristics to that system. As I mentioned, it will have some key aspects of document management, file management, our typical Office and Microsoft tools, as well as Microsoft Teams integrations. But when we look at the more future-proofing and futuristic aspects of legal technology, we'll see the ability to not just connect those fundamental data sources via SQL, Oracle, but we'll also see the evolving areas of open API technology and AI connections, allowing these platforms to better analyze data, but also to leverage best-in-class technology from other jurisdictions, from other areas of the law, but also of the software business. For many years, FinTech has really led the way in terms of having this predictive and scalable modeling of data. Legal technology has been somewhat behind that curve, but with things like the advent of API connections and AI connections, we as legal departments, we as lawyers will be able to more effectively leverage that solution as well. So if we were to expand further onto some of the areas of enterprise legal management, I've just pulled out 8 key areas as to how your usage of a solution, how you might look at transforming the way that your legal department works. You may not be blessed with a dedicated digital transformation team. Not many of our clients are, but for those that are, they'll be leading and pioneering these projects. For those that aren't, they'll be doing it alongside their day job. So it's down to us as suppliers, vendors, implementers of legal technology to make that as easy as possible for the clients that are securing these solutions and implementing these solutions. So I think that even in the short time of 2020, as soon as the pandemic really hit, we saw a huge amount of push towards online collaboration through the use of virtual meeting, virtual presence. But we also saw the ability for legal departments to pivot very quickly to extranets, to portals, and document collaboration sites. Now that may have left the heads of the IT directors being thoroughly scratched, but within quick time, relatively speaking, for a technology deployment, within a month or two, we were able to provide solutions where clients could upload a document, share a document, comment on it, collaborate on it, whereas previously this could have taken a year to 18 months to implement. Cost has been the main success factor of that, making affordable legal tech solutions, but also making the speed in which they're able to be deployed. And if we look towards the future, hopefully in a more prosperous 2021, with both a healthier workforce and a healthier economy, we can look towards continuing that journey of legal technology. This should by no means be a stopgap. This should be a continuous, evolving, developing ecosystem for our legal departments to work in. Deal rooms and virtual data rooms should be the bread and butter of the future. They should be fundamental areas that either I as an individual or a company engaging with the law firm or legal department would have access to as standard. Why would you as an individual or a company engaging a law firm want to work with a law firm that is manually driven, paper processed, where everything needs to be signed in the office? We need to centralize that into digital systems, digital ecosystems like this. But it will be driven by suppliers and vendors of these solutions to make that affordable, scalable, and effective during that time. So hopefully that gives you a brief insight into digital transformation, some of the things that we're doing here at Thomson Reuters, but also in the Middle East and Africa. With that, I'll hand you back to the Forte team just to handle any questions that might have come in. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Nick. We do have a few questions for you. One of them is, As an in-house lawyer, where would you recommend I start my transformation journey?
Yeah, and I noticed that the attendee is anonymous, but for a corporate legal department, I think you need to first address the immediate needs. If you have that legal data and research, that founding pillar, that foundation in place for online data and research, then you can use things like the evaluation matrix to basically analyze to see where you are. Where are you at the moment for your in-house legal department? Are you chaotic? Are you reactive, proactive, or optimized? Now, I'm a massive advocate for saying to start with the fundamentals. If you are using spreadsheets and using shared folders and maybe using something like Dropbox or a little bit of SharePoint, then there's a tremendous amount of very simple, very quick to deploy solutions that you can put in place. But happy to answer that offline as well if you want to discuss it. I can see another question here as well.
Yes, another one for you. So do you think the pandemic has triggered a wake-up call regarding the impact and potential of tech? Do you think this will actually last?
Yeah, it's frustrating to me because I feel like I've been flying the flag for the last 10 years to tell legal departments and law firms that, you know, technology is the future and that it will be paramount to the success of any legal department, any organization across the world. But it's, in some respects, it is a shame that it's taken us to get to this stage of a pandemic to be able to address that. However, I think you have to be optimistic that although it has taken this awful event to drive change and to drive change in not just the way that legal departments and courts and law firms work, but just generally how we all collaborate, how we interact in our day-to-day life, why are we all spending so much time on trains and buses and aeroplanes to conduct meetings when it could have been done virtually. So I really do think that there's been a shift, and yes, it will last. It is here to stay. If you look at just alone the amount of investment that's going into legal technology from traditionally conservative organizations and also non-legal tech providers, like Microsoft, like Oracle, like SAP, they see that the market is available. They see that it's applicable now to them as well and worth investing in.
Okay, I'm just a bit weary on time, so I'm just going to take one more question from our audience. The rest of the questions will be answered online. Okay, so this is from Elliot. For a legal department that are slow to move due to the lack of knowledge and lack of confidence in technology, how would you approach this conversation with the decision makers? How would we push for change and digital transformation?
I like this one, Elliot, only because someone asked me this about 2 hours ago today, which was, why would I do this? And if I don't have people that are bought into the idea, then how would I address it? My view would be that for the most part, and I do say for the majority of us as individuals, as professionals, we want to improve the way that we operate and our organisation that we work with operates. We want to progress on a personal level, our career and our professional development. And something that I have found is incredibly motivating for the legal departments that I work with is to bring them along on that journey. What would it look like to have an engaged workforce, an engaged legal department, where the legal team was seen as a, proactive, powerful force making positive change to the organisation, instead of that historical belief that the legal department slows things up, causes delays, questions and queries everything about the contract or deal or sale or whatever it is, or goods and services that you might be selling, might be. So this does boil down to personal relationships. As a provider, it's my job to work with those teams and to say to them, look, this is how digital transformation can look, and it can be a tremendous asset to you for your own professional development if you're able to leave that legacy in place as well. Natasha, I can see one about digital transformation being a buzzword in MENA. I don't know if I've got time to answer that, but I'd love to have.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to have a crack at this one, because I know Mark Beer has been part of our panel and the LTIC contingent as well. And I've discussed this at length with him before and many others. But I think one of the challenges in MENA is that there's been a lack of validation of the experts that are advocating for these solutions. So what I mean by that is that legal technology is not widely known. It wasn't widely established. And as such, you had key events, key conferences, whether they be virtual or in person, where people were talking about legal technology. And I, as a supplier, as a vendor of legal tech solutions, would sit there and think, you know, we can't be talking about AI and blockchain for the legal departments in the Middle East when so many of the organizations there were storing documents in, you know, in warehouses, in Saudi, in the UAE, where documents were physically being destroyed or being lost through negligence, through damage, fire damage often in the summertime. And it just baffled me that there was no kind of validation or no kind of scrutiny like you might get in other regions as to the credibility of the people that were discussing it. So I think that it's been an attractive and a really forward-thinking area to talk about, and many people before me have gone up and talked about it, but it's only now that people are actually starting to deliver and implement these solutions. So less talking, more doing is the polite way to answer it.